Okay. All righty. Thank you. All right. Back to introducing Ariel. The main event is we're so excited to have Dr. Ariel Firebaugh with us to share her knowledge of fireflies. She's Director of Scientific Engagement at Blandy Experimental Farm in Winchester. She studied the effects of light pollution on firefly behavior and ecology. During her dissertation research, she trained homeowners to census fireflies in their own backyards. I'm sorry I missed that. I can't wait to learn more about these magical creatures. So I will turn it over to Ariel. So take it away, Ariel, and I will mute my own self here.
Thanks so much, Donna. How's everybody doing tonight? It's so exciting to see such excitement about fireflies. They are just such neat little insects. So hopefully we'll get this talk wrapped up in time tonight for you to be able to look out your windows and see if there's any firefly activity in your own backyard tonight. So I'm lucky enough to get to have spent some real quality time with a great group of insects, fireflies. I like to say that these are the gateway insects. They're how a lot of us got started being interested in the natural world and insects, and they're just so magical, you know? Nobody is going outside and getting a big cockroach and putting it in a mason jar on their bedside table, right? It just doesn't happen. But there's something different about fireflies. They're one of the few insects that people, or a lot of people, are willing to actually go out of their way and touch. So I think that they're just so special, and I'm so thrilled to get to share a little bit about fireflies with you all tonight, and hopefully hear a little bit from you all about your experiences with fireflies and what they mean to you. So before I get started with fireflies, which is the real reason we're here, I'm obligated to do a little commercial for Blandy Experimental Farm. Just a quick show of hands, or feel free to write it down in the chat. How many of y'all have heard of Blandy Experimental Farm before? Okay, I'm seeing some nods. How many of you all have had a chance to come out and visit us at Blandy? Okay, a couple nods, but a couple of y'all, I think, I hope we'll get an opportunity to come up here for a little visit. We are about 2 hours north of Charlottesville. We're near Winchester, Virginia, in Clark County. We are a University of Virginia field research station, and we're also the State Arboretum of Virginia. So we're a big tree museum. We have tree species here from all over the world, trees you would never expect to find in here in Clark County, Virginia, like cedars of Lebanon. I am zooming in to you all tonight from the quarters building, which is shown in this picture. It's one of our main buildings on grounds. It's where my office is located. So our Blandy has 712 acres to explore. This is a photo of our native plant meadow. I think this was taken in September or October. It's just gorgeous. We're open every day from dawn to dusk. There's no admission fee or a gate or anything. You're just welcome to come up and explore. There are meadows, forests, gardens, interesting trees. There's always something interesting to see at Blandy. One of our big attractions coming up in this fall is the ginkgo grove. So we have this huge 300 tree ginkgo grove. It's an experiment that was started in the 40s to learn more about ginkgo sex ratios, and now it's just kind of become a big attraction at Blandy. These are our celebrity trees. Thousands of people come out every weekend in the fall to watch the leaves go from lime green to this glorious golden color. So that might be a good time to come up and visit if you haven't been up to see us yet. We're also host to a pretty thriving schedule of public programs and school field trips. So we see thousands of school children who come to to Blandy each year to learn more about the natural world, see what's going on in the wetland or in the field. We also offer programs for general audiences. And then a lot of folks in this neck of the woods know us for some of our big annual events, like our Mother's Day native plant sale. So if you haven't had a chance to come up and see us, I hope you will, if you happen to be in this neck of the woods. We're also an environmental science field research station, so we're affiliated with the Department of Environmental Sciences at UVA. We have 3 professors who, they're full UVA professors, but their lab and office space is here at Blandy, about 2 hours away from Charlottesville. And each summer we host about 30 researchers, everywhere from undergraduates to graduate students to postdocs to full professors. And many of them study native plants and insects. So that kind of leads to my interest in fireflies. Here I am as a little eager graduate student. I studied fireflies in graduate school. I was a student in the Department of Environmental Sciences at UVA, and I was lucky enough to be able to do research at Blandy, and even luckier still to be able to study fireflies. So here's me gearing up for a night in the field. I've got my boots because the grass is wet. I've got my headlamp. I've got my trusty net. And I'm preparing to spend a big chunk of the evening collecting data, but also just taking in the wonders of the fireflies at Blandy. And I might have seen sites a little bit like this. They're just such magical creatures. And I just feel so fortunate that of all the critters out in the world, it was fireflies that I got to study. In tonight's talk, I'm going to give a little overview of firefly natural history. We'll talk a little bit about why fireflies flash. I'll give you some tips for identifying some of the common fireflies that are in this area. And then I'll say a little bit about how firefly populations are doing. Are they declining? If so, what can we do about it? So that's just a little overview of where this talk is headed tonight. And then hopefully at the end, I'll have time for questions. And I'd love to hear your questions or just firefly stories that are special to you. So first of all, what the heck is a firefly? Well, the common name is a little bit misleading. Fireflies are not flies like this housefly here. They're actually beetles. So they've got 2 sets of wings, a hard outer set, and then an inner set for flying, which you can see here with these arrows. Now, some of y'all are probably used to calling them fireflies, but depending on where you grew up, you might be more comfortable calling these insects lightning bugs, and that's okay. Both are perfectly acceptable. And it looks like there is some regional variation in what we grew up calling these insects. So there was a big dialect survey done by North Carolina State University, surveyed hundreds of thousands of people over the United States, and they asked, what do you call the insect that flies around in the summer and has a rear section that glows in the dark? These green sections of the United States are where they're predominantly known as fireflies. There are some sections in blue where lightning bug is most common. And then there are other parts of the United States where firefly and lightning bug seems to be used kind of interchangeably. I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta. I think I grew up calling them fireflies, but I know I had cousins who lived just outside of Roanoke, Virginia, and they always called them lightning bugs. So if you'd like, feel free to write in the chat what you grew up calling fireflies. I'd especially love to know if you grew up calling them something other than firefly or lightning bug. But for this talk, I'm going to say firefly just because it's a little bit fewer syllables. But I like lightning bug too. That's a fun common name for this insect. Now, some of you may have also heard of fireflies called as glowworms. And glowworms that's one of those common names that it could be applied to a lot of different animals out there. So depending on where you are in the world, glowworm could mean a beetle in the family Phingodidae. It could be a millipede that also produces this bioluminescent reaction. It glows. You could be talking about a fungus gnat that live in these caves in New Zealand. Or if you're in Europe, you might know glowworms as the females of this particular firefly species that lives there, where the females don't have wings. So they look kind of like little worms with a little spot on their abdomen that glows. So glowworm, it could be talking about fireflies, but it also could describe another invertebrate. Fireflies come in all shapes and sizes. We think there are probably over 2,000 species of fireflies worldwide. And here in the United States, there could be as many as 125 species. Some are big, like this Photurus here, and then some of them are just teensy tiny. They also have a wide variety of lifestyles. So there's the Big Dipper firefly. This is one of the most common fireflies in our area that comes out at around sunset. Many of you all may have heard of these beautiful synchronous fireflies that are found in Great Smoky Mountains National Park. One of the really unique things about these fireflies is that they all flash at exactly the same time. I have not seen this, but it's on my bucket list. If any of you all have been lucky enough to go out and see these fireflies at Great Smoky Mountains, let me know in the chat. I'll be so jealous. There are some fireflies that are predators. They actually eat other fireflies, which is what the firefly in this picture is doing here. It's nomming down on another firefly. And then believe it or not, there are actually some fireflies that are not active at night. They're active during the day. So fireflies, they come in all shapes and sizes, and they have a wide range of different interesting kind of lifestyles and behaviors. Now, fireflies are beetles, and beetles, just like butterflies, do this complete metamorphosis thing where they look really different at each stage of their life cycle, and the juvenile stages look really different than the adults. So the fireflies that are out now in the summer are in the adult stage of their life cycle, and they'll be adults for 1 to 2 months. The females right now are probably just wrapping up laying eggs. So the egg stage will be around for 3 weeks. Then the eggs will hatch, they'll become larvae. The larvae will eventually become pupa. But I've left this question mark here because this is something that many of us, including me, before I studied fireflies, have not really thought about. So we're really used to thinking about and imagining these adult fireflies, but what the heck does a baby firefly look like? What do they look like in this larval stage? So just take a couple minutes and think to yourself, what do you think a baby firefly looks like? Do you think it has wings? Do you think it glows? So just start to form a little picture in your mind. Okay, now I'm going to reveal what a baby firefly looks like. It might blow your mind. It blew my mind. This is a baby firefly. Isn't that crazy? It's like you took a roly-poly and squished it, and then you can't see it in this picture, but they have these 2 little glow spots down on their rear end. And fireflies will remain as larvae for 1 to 2 years. So most of the time that a firefly is a firefly, it doesn't look like these adult fireflies at all, which is what we usually think of when we imagine fireflies. It looks like this weird, flat, roly-poly thing. It blows my mind. I also have a challenge for you this evening. The summer fireflies are the adults that come out in the summer. They're just getting wrapped up. But if you haven't gotten your firefly fix this year, there's still time. This fall, so September, October, if you have a chance, go outside around 8 or 9 o'clock at night and look down on the ground. And if you're really, really lucky, you might see these little glows. It's just real brief, kind of green down in the grass, especially if you live near a stream or a wetland area. Those are the baby fireflies. Not many people are lucky enough to have seen them, but it's kind of a fun challenge for the fall. Go outside at night, see if you can find one of these baby fireflies. You'll be looking for a little green glow down in the grass. And then if you can, you can sneak up and maybe put a flashlight on it and see if it's a baby firefly. That's one of my favorite times of year to look for fireflies because these larvae are just so cool. Now, where do fireflies fit in the food chain? You know, what are they doing in the ecosystem? Well, the firefly larva, which remember, fireflies spend 1 to 2 years of their lives as larvae and just 1 to 2 months as adults. So most of the time that a firefly is a firefly, it's in this larval stage. These larvae are predators. They live down on the ground or in the soil, and they eat soft-bodied invertebrates. So beetle larvae, earthworms, anything kind of soft and slow-moving that they can get a hold of, they'll eat. Adult fireflies, some of them are eaten by other fireflies. Sometimes they'll get caught in a spider's web, but they actually produce these very unpleasant tasting chemical compounds. So things like bats and birds and frogs, they might sample a firefly and spit it out, but fireflies are probably not a major prey item for frogs and bats and birds and that kind of thing. So really it's in this larval stage where they may be having the largest impact on the food chain because they are these fierce predators. Okay, so we talked a little bit about firefly natural history. Now let's talk about why do fireflies flash? What are they doing out there on a magical night like this? Well, first thing, not all fireflies flash. So there are actually some fireflies that you can find around here that are active during the day and not at night. And they don't flash or glow at all. So here are 2 examples, Elychnia and Lucidota. I like to say that these kind of look like goth fireflies to me, just because they're black looking and they're leading this kind of subversive diurnal lifestyle that just seems strange for a firefly. But there are some fireflies out there like these diurnal fireflies that don't flash at all. But of course, when we think about fireflies, we usually are thinking about the species that are active at night, they're nocturnal, and they flash. And so many of these species are flashing to find mates. So they're trying to find another firefly that is the same species that they could potentially mate with. And they have this specialized organ on their abdomens, which you can see here in yellow. It's called the lantern. That's the fancy sciencey word for this organ, because firefly scientists like puns and just have to make everything about light. So the firefly light organ is called the lantern. And so when you see them out there flashing around, they're having these little conversations. And usually it's the males that are flying around and they're flashing. And they're just hoping that a female down in the grass or a bush is going to see their flash and say, yes, you are the firefly for me. I would like to get to know you better. And the female will flash back, and then the male will flash, and the female will flash, and they'll just have these little flash conversations until eventually things get serious, and some little baby fireflies are made. Now, just like many songbirds have unique songs that they'll sing, different firefly species have different patterns of flashes, and it's almost a little bit like Morse code, but with light. And so if you really want to get nerdy about fireflies, there are charts like this from the Massachusetts Audubon Society that you can look at. And the way to read this is it's got the time up at the top here, and then you'll be looking for the amount of time between the flashes that you see. So for this Photinus ignitus up front, there will be about 5 seconds between flashes. Some fireflies will flash in groups, so in groups of 2. And then there are other fireflies that will do this kind of swoopy flash, which I'll talk about. But this is something that you can do if you'd like to learn more about fireflies. Get a chart like this, go out in your backyard, see who's there. It takes a little bit of practice, but you'll pick it up pretty quickly, I think. And it's just so rewarding to be able to go out there and know what firefly species are living in your backyard. So the flashes and glows that we see, it's the result of a bioluminescent reaction. And there's a special chemical enzyme that catalyzes this reaction. It's called luciferase, because again, in firefly research, everything has to be a pun about light. So this enzyme is what gives their fireflies their flash. This enzyme luciferase, in addition to playing a big role in bioluminescence for fireflies and other organisms, it also has some applications in industry. So it can be used to detect bacterial contamination. So maybe you want to know if there are salmonella or E. coli in your drinking water or in the applesauce that you're making in your applesauce factory. And before the 1980s, we were not able to manufacture this luciferase compound synthetically. So the only way to get this luciferase compound for use in the industry was to go out and catch fireflies and grind them up and extract out the luciferase. So if you were a kid in the 1960s, the 1970s, maybe part of the 1980s, this could have been your summer job. The Sigma chemical company, which is Sigma Aldrich today, put out this call nationwide. Hey kids, go out, collect fireflies, mail them to us. We'll give you a penny a firefly. I don't know, it sounds like a pretty good summer job to me, except for all the firefly mortality that happened as a result, but sounds like it would have been a lot of fun, maybe a little bit better than a paper route. Unfortunately, the downside is that by some estimates, about 90 million fireflies may have been collected as part of this scheme by all of these enterprising young firefly entrepreneurs. And we just don't really know what kind of an impact that might have had on firefly populations. Probably not a good one. Fortunately, though, we can now manufacture this luciferase enzyme synthetically in the lab. So this is no longer a summer job for kids that I know of. Now we'll talk a little bit about some of the common fireflies that are out there. So these are fireflies that you may have in your backyard. And I'll talk a little bit about tips and tricks for how to start to get a sense of what you're looking at. Okay, so here's a diagram of a firefly, and I'm pointing out some of the key anatomical features that might be helpful to you as you start to figure out what fireflies are in your backyard. The antennae up here, of course. For the diurnal fireflies, these tend to be really big and brushy. There's also this special feature of the firefly. It's called the pronotum. It's this big kind of plate on the back of the head. Different species have different patterns of usually yellow, red, and black on their pronotum. Another thing to look at are the elytra, the outer wings. So sometimes these are more black in color, sometimes they're more tan in color. And then the lantern is another useful feature. So that's that big light organ that's on the firefly's abdomen. So in addition to some of the anatomical features, with fireflies, it can be really useful to pay attention to their behaviors and their activity patterns. So knowing some information about what a firefly's flash looks like and when at night or during the day it's active can help you to figure out what species you're looking at. So looking at the flash pattern, thinking about, is it active? Are you seeing the fireflies right at sunset? Are you seeing them an hour after sunset, 2 hours after sunset? There are different species of fireflies that will come out at different times of night. So that's a good thing to pay attention to. You can also think about, where is it flying in your backyard? Is it close to the ground? Does it start close to the ground and then go up as the night goes on? Are you mostly just seeing it up in the tree canopies? So studying fireflies it's just a great excuse to go out and observe nature. It's just a lot of fun. So here are a couple of common species of fireflies in our area. We'll start with one of my favorite fireflies, the common eastern firefly, Photinus pyralis. Sometimes this is also called the Big Dipper firefly. This is the firefly that tends to end up in mason jars because they come out right at sunset. They fly at around kid level, so they're really easy just to scoop up, and they're pretty slow flyers. So you don't really even need a net to catch these fireflies. You can almost just kind of scoop them out of the air with your hands. So these are the fireflies that will often end up in mason jars or kind of smushed between the hands of a aspiring young entomologist. So here's a picture of a male Photinus pyralis firefly and a female Photinus pyralis firefly. You can see the male has a much larger lantern. It's 2 segments in the male as opposed to 1 segment in the female. I also like to point out that the lantern on this firefly is a little bit rounded down at the bottom, and I'll show you a comparison of species where it's a little pointier. So these fireflies tend to start flashing right at sunset. Their flashes are a little bit yellowish in color. And if you watch closely, you'll see that the males, as they're flying around, flashing, trying to find a female to talk to, they'll almost rise up a little bit as they're flashing. So at a distance, a field full of Photinus pyralis fireflies almost looks like it's on fire. It almost looks like they're just flames flickering up out of the grass as the fireflies flash and kind of rise up. So some people say that this flash looks like a J or a swoosh, and that's often how you'll see it represented on firefly flash charts. Okay, so that's the most common firefly around here, Photinus pyralis. You may see some of these in your backyard this evening. They're very widespread. They'll be in suburban habitats, sometimes even in urban habitats, and definitely out in the country like at Blandy. There's another group of fireflies, though, that are also fairly common. So these are fireflies in the genus Photurus. They don't have a fun common name, so we just call them Photurus fireflies. These fireflies tend to start flashing about an hour or 2 hours after sunset. So they're starting to flash a little bit later in the evening. To many people, their flashes look a little bit greener in appearance compared to the Photinus pyralis fireflies. Their lantern is a little bit pointier at the bottom compared to the Photinus pyralis fireflies. If you see them out there flying, they fly pretty fast and they flash as they fly. So it's almost like one of those little, what are they? Phasers, like in the science fiction movies. It's just like pew, 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 pew. They fly really fast and they flash as they fly. So they're really fun to look at when they're out in a field flashing. So these fireflies are also predatory. Many of them will eat Photinus pyralis fireflies and other prey fireflies. And the way that they do this, it's just such an interesting example of evolution. So they've learned how to mimic the flash patterns of their prey firefly species. So a predatory Photurus firefly will be down in the grass, flashing in the pattern of one of its prey species, and the unsuspecting prey firefly will be flying around, and they'll think that they're seeing a female prey firefly, and so they'll get closer and closer and closer, and then all of a sudden the predatory firefly will fly up and grab it and eat it. It's pretty fierce. So sometimes these are called femme fatale fireflies because they lure in other fireflies and eat them. I saw this. I've never seen this in the wild as it's happened, but there were many nights when I was doing research where I would accidentally put a predatory firefly and a prey firefly in the same vial because it was night, and I couldn't see very well. And then at the end of the night, there would just be one predatory firefly in the vial and lots of little bits of pieces of wings and antenna for the poor prey firefly. So these predatory fireflies are pretty fierce. So if you had both of these fireflies in your hand, the Photinus pyralis versus the Photurus, a couple of features to look at. The Photinus pyralis firefly tends to have a pretty straight back. The Photurus firefly tends to be a little bit more humped if you were to look at it in profile. And the outer wings, the elytra of the Photinus pyralis, tend to be a little bit blacker in color. The Photurus, to me, have more of a yellow or tanner look. You can also look at the lantern. So the Photinus pyralis will be a little bit rounder at the base of the lantern, and the Photurus will be a little pointier. So those were some of our common nocturnal fireflies, the Photinus pyralis and the Photurus. Those are just two examples. There are lots of others out there, and I'll talk a little bit about how you can learn more about the fireflies in your own backyard. But I always like to give equal time to the diurnal fireflies, just because they're so unexpected. So these diurnal fireflies, they tend to be blacker in color, and they have these huge, big, brushy antennae. So remember, they don't flash or glow at all, but they do use chemical pheromones to communicate. So they've got these huge, big antennae, lots of surface area to pick up those pheromones traveling around in the air. And at Blandy, I'll often have these land on me if I'm walking through a field or a shrubby area. Okay, so I've talked about a couple of species, but certainly not the 125 species of firefly that are here in North America. So many of you might be asking, okay, well, that's great, but can you tell me what species I have in my own backyard? So if you are really interested in learning more about your local firefly diversity, this is a great, fun summer project. And although summer is winding down, it's not too late. There's a resource that I would highly recommend if you are really serious about learning what species are in your backyard. It's this field guide, Fireflies, Glowworms, and Lightning Bugs. It's by Lynn Frierson Faust. I can recommend this field guide without reservation, not because I'm getting any kind of a kickback or anything, but because it happens to be the only field guide to fireflies in Eastern North America. But it is also just a really readable book. It's very engaging. It has a lot of good tips. If you're not quite ready to invest in a field guide, there are some good online resources. Massachusetts Audubon Society has a lot of great resources out there, including these flash guides like this. So these are two places to get started if you really want to know what species you have in your backyard. Oh, here's just a picture of Lynn Faust, the author of the field guide. She's got this cute little pink firefly net. And she's just a good person. She knows everything there is to know about fireflies, not because she has any kind of a fancy degree, but just because she goes out in her backyard every night and looks at fireflies, and she's just done that her whole life. So she's a great addition to the firefly research community. Okay, so we talked about firefly natural history. We've talked about some of the common fireflies. Now let's talk about, are fireflies disappearing? Well, a lot of people will say, you know, it just seems like there are fewer fireflies today than there were 10, 15, 20 years ago when I was a kid. Where have all the fireflies gone? And every once in a while, a major news source like New York Times or USA Today or NPR will pick up one of these stories. And so the truth is, we don't know. We don't know if firefly populations are disappearing because we have very few long-term data sets about firefly populations. No one was out collecting data 50 or 100 years ago. And so it's really hard to make a good comparison, but we are working on it. We are working to expand research on firefly populations. So, one reason that we just don't know much is that it's a pretty small research community. So this is a blurry picture, but this is a conference that I went to for firefly researchers all over the world. So as you can see, it's kind of a small group. There aren't many of us out there. So it's a huge challenge trying to figure out what in the world is going on with firefly populations. The good news is that since I went to this conference, big, new, exciting firefly research projects have started. So there's a group at IUCN that's especially looking at firefly conservation. Xerces Society just also launched this big new firefly research project. So we are moving in the right direction. So, are firefly populations declining? Maybe. I mean, we don't have great historical data, but we do know that many other native insects are experiencing declines. And there's it's not too far-fetched to think that maybe fireflies are experiencing some of those same stressors that other native insect populations are facing. So I'll just pick out 3 here. Remember, most of the time that a firefly is a firefly, it's in that larval stage, so it's living on or under the ground. So there's a potential for them to be picking up pesticides and herbicides from their environment and from the critters that they eat. Habitat loss could also be a factor. So some fireflies live in fields, some live in forests. Not many fireflies live in big parking lots, right? So probably they are experiencing some habitat loss. Another factor that is a little bit unique for fireflies is light pollution. So artificial light from things like porch lights and street lights. When fireflies are out there flying around flashing, they're trying to find another firefly to mate with. And so there's a small but growing body of research studying how artificial light in the environment affects firefly flash communication and mating. This is one of the things that I worked on when I was in graduate school. And it seems like there are some species of fireflies that just won't flash if there is too much light pollution in their environment. And so if they're not flashing, does that mean that they're not mating as often? And what does that mean for firefly populations in the long run? This is a really new area of study, but it does seem like light pollution may be one of those stressors that could be impacting firefly populations. Okay, so that's the doom and gloom part of the talk. Let's talk about what you can do. All right, focus on the positive. So first, and this is something you can do tonight if you want, is just take a moment to go out and appreciate and observe your local fireflies, right? See who's out in your backyard. Where are they? Are you seeing different colors? Are you seeing different flash patterns? Right, we have to notice and appreciate them before we're inspired to do something else, right? So go outside and observe your local fireflies. 2, take a look at your local firefly habitat. If you're a homeowner, maybe your lawn. If you're not a homeowner, maybe if there's a park nearby, and just start to think about, are there changes that you can make to your local firefly habitat to make it more amenable to native insects? So fireflies are a native insect, and could you be planting more natives? Could you adjust the frequency with which you mow your lawn so that the grass grows up a little longer? Could you change the time of day when you're mowing your lawn? So fireflies, they kind of come out of the grass an hour or so before sunset. So is it possible for you to avoid mowing your lawn during that window when they're likely to be coming up out of the grass and maybe vulnerable to being mowed? So just starting to think about your local firefly habitat and think about, are there positive changes that you can make? Oh, also, with light pollution, maybe you're not comfortable turning off your lights all the time, but would it be feasible to put your lights on a motion timer, right? Just these little things that we can do could make a difference. And then what else can you do? Well, you can help collect data about firefly populations. So for fireflies, really, even presence and absence data is valuable. There's just so much that we don't know about their distributions and populations. And so contributing data to a community science platform like iNaturalist or Firefly Watch, which is another great group, we can start to build those longer term data sets to really begin to understand how firefly populations are doing today. How are they doing in the future? Well, how will they be doing in the future? We can start to look for trends like that. So I've said just about all that I can say. Thanks so much for your time this evening. So excited to get to share a little bit about fireflies with you all. If there's time, I'd love to take questions and hear stories. But also I want to leave you all with a couple of resources to keep learning about fireflies. So this field guide that I mentioned from Lynn Frierson-Faust, and then also a couple groups that are really working on learning more about firefly populations and are seeking to promote conservation of fireflies and other native insects. So thanks so much for your time this evening.
Gosh, thanks, Ariel. That was fascinating. I learned more than I even expected to learn. So do folks have questions? You could raise your hand or you could put a question in the chat, but I'm sure Ariel would be glad to answer some of those questions. Oh, where do they lay their eggs?
Oh, that's a great question. So female fireflies lay eggs on or under the ground. I've never seen their eggs out in the wild. I've gone out and looked, but they're just teeny tiny. So they're laying their eggs on or under the ground.
Gotcha. Sandy Oglesby asked if you happen to know if it's too late in the season to join the Mass Audubon Firefly Watch?
I don't think so. If nothing else, you can familiarize yourself with their research protocols and get geared up for next year, but I think there's still time to join.
Super. Is there a relationship between glowworms and fireflies?
Yeah, so glowworm, that's one of those common names that could be applied to a lot of different critters. It could be a firefly, so a beetle in the family Lampyridae. Depending on what part of the world you're in, you could also be talking about a fungus gnat that lives on the ceiling of a cave in New Zealand. Now, a lot of times in Europe, you'll see fireflies referred to as glowworms because one of the common species that they have over there, the males fly, but the females do not fly and they don't have wings, but they do glow. So sometimes people say that they look like little glowing worms, glowworms.
Great. Where are they during the day?
Fireflies, well, so the fireflies that are nocturnal and that flash at night, they are resting during the day. And so sometimes if you go out, and especially if you look under trees and shrubs with big leaves, like milkweed, or here at Blandy, we have a lot of magnolias and catalpas. You just kind of look up under the leaves, and sometimes you'll see fireflies just hanging out, resting. It's a nice shady spot. But they're typically finding a a shady, sheltered place to rest during the day.
Super. Are there other things that look like firefly larvae?
There are some beetles that have larvae that look a little similar. To me, firefly larvae look a lot like roly-polies, but just squished a little bit flatter. They've got kind of the same coloration and those several segments like a roly-poly would. But firefly larvae, to my knowledge, are the only things that you'll find around here that are glowing in the fall. So that's a dead giveaway.
Cool. Do male fireflies mate more than once per season?
Yes, most of them do.
Okay. Does the firefly flash get faster or slower with higher or lower temperatures, like with cricket chirps?
Absolutely, yes. So firefly flashes, the interval between the flashes will get a little bit faster if it's warmer. And that's something that some firefly flash charts will take into account. So they'll say, for this species, you can expect their flashes to be 4 seconds apart if it's 80 degrees, and a little bit faster if it's hotter than that.
Huh. So Adele asked if, she said she's seen photos of firefly larvae eating snails and looking pretty ferocious. They look different than a flat pill bug, more streamlined. Where do these species live?
Yeah, so to me, that sounds a little bit like the species of firefly, or some of the species of fireflies that live in Asia. And also there are some, I think, in Florida. So these fireflies have larvae that are aquatic or semi-aquatic. They live down in the water. And you're right, their bodies do look a little bit more streamlined than the Photinus pyralis and Photurus fireflies that are more common around here. But that's a fun rabbit hole to go through on YouTube, is look up firefly larvae eating. They are very fierce.
Helen asked if you mentioned that the height of their flight might be species specific. This year, I've seen a lot of fireflies way up in the trees, mostly oak. What would you guess about which species that might be?
Ooh. So I think there are some species in the genus Photinus that could be. There are also some species in the genus Pyractomina, which we didn't talk about. But I like to call those, this is not the correct common name, but I like to call them Christmas tree light fireflies, because if you see a tree with those fireflies, it really does look like it's just lit up with Christmas tree lights. But that could be a great thing for you to go out and observe, Helen, and use one of those firefly flash charts.
Gosh, we haven't stumped you yet, Ariel. So the next question,
oh, well,
and the last question so far. 20 to 30 years ago, the fireflies were not around here, 2,000 feet in the mountains of Greene County. They're now all over. Could this be attributed to global warming?
Ooh, I'm not sure. There's just a lot that we don't know about firefly populations as a baseline. And so how those populations are being affected by global warming, I don't know. That's going to have to be a project for a lot of enterprising, enthusiastic graduate students with help from great people in the community who are out there collecting data and making observations.
Great. I'm going to stop the recording now. And it's a question from Martha. Do they also